Hey, welcome back. It's David, and we're doing more watercolor painting for kids ages 5 and up. Last time we did this beautiful painting here. I think it came out great. I hope yours did too. So we're going to do another landscape today. So start off with your big brush, piece of paper, some water, maybe a little paper towels, and your paints, of course. And we'll get to painting. Alright, again, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to prime our paper again. So get your big brush out, get your big brush wet, and coat the paper with some water. We're going to do another kind of landscape similar to the other ones, but a little different. But whenever you're doing like a sky, when you're doing a sky, you like to have it gradated, or have the color kind of fade in and out. So you always want to prime your paper like this to make it easier. And get a big brush, and we're going to do a blue sky. Get some blue on the paper. Of course, we want it darker near the top and have it get lighter near the bottom, but it doesn't have to start out that way. You can see here I'm just kind of putting down color right now. I'm just kind of putting down blue and not really paying attention to whether it gradates well yet or not. So don't worry too much about that yet. Just kind of get down some blue. We'll come back later and change it. I always like to get some of those hairs out of there. If I do have a hair that comes off of my brush, you don't want to keep it on your paper too long, or it'll dry on there and it'll be there forever. Alright, we got a pretty good covering of blue. So now I'm going to go back to my bigger brush. Wash this one out first. Go back to my bigger brush. In some spots I'm going to fade it out a little more. And how to do that is just get this brush wet and just go over the spots where you painted. You see here it's getting a little lighter. The more water you add to it, the more it's going to lighten up. And then you want to come back in to the top and get this darker and hit it with some more blue. Get that hair out of there. Get out of there, hair. Hit the top with some more blue. Probably got enough water in my paint there. I probably don't need to go back for more right now. So the main idea is we just want the top to be more blue than the bottom. Now that we've got a good amount of blue up here again, and come back with our bigger brush and kind of smooth it out again. And just go from the top to the bottom and kind of smooth it out. Get a nice gradation going. You see down here by the bottom, it's pretty light. And that's what we want. I don't know what this is here. I'm going to try and get some of that off of there. It looks like just some weird stuff on my paper. We might just have to live with it being weird. Sometimes you got to just accept the way that the painting is. Yeah, I don't know what that is. I don't think it's coming out though. We'll leave it there. It'll be fine. Do want to get this little hair out of there. Be gone, hair. So now that we've got a nice gradation of blue, you could come back in even more and add even more blue to the top, make it even darker. It's up to you. But this is what we want, just a nice subtle gradation of blue from the top down to the bottom. Nice and thinned out. If you need to thin it out even more, you can always come back with more water. Just don't put more paint on the brush. Just come back with more water on your big brush. And if you need to even, you can take a paper towel. And you can kind of dab up some of that. You see how it made it quite a bit lighter, but also put that texture in it. So we don't want that texture, so go back over it again with the brush. But it lightened it up quite a bit there. So we need to let this dry. So let this dry for about 10 minutes and then we'll come back and we'll work on the painting some more. All right, we got our beautiful sky here. What we're gonna paint is we're gonna put in some mountains down here on the bottom. And then we're gonna have maybe 3 or 4 hot air balloons up in the sky. That'll be our painting for today. So let's start with our mountains. So get, one of the smaller brushes, not the smallest, but one of the smaller ones. We're going to use a little bit of black, but we really want to thin it out. So get your tray over here. The first layer that we want to do the black is we want to really thin it out. So put some over here and really get it wet. Use a lot of water. Thin the black out. We want it to be pretty light when we go and paint our mountains. The first mountain, don't really worry too much about. We want it pretty light like this. And just kind of let your brush go wherever you feel like it going. That kind of makes like a mountain range. Just kind of move up and down here and there. And then we just want to fill in back afterwards. Go ahead and fill back in with some gray. And after this dries, we're going to go over this again. So don't worry too much about making it perfect. Just fill in with some gray. A little bit of that really thinned out black. That's the first part of our mountain range. So we're going to have a mountain range in the background there. Next, while this is drying, we're going to let that dry and we're going to paint in some of our hot air balloons. So pick out a color, I'd say other than blue probably, that would be good for a hot air balloon. So I think my first one I want is red. So I'm going to use kind of the bigger brush for now. We're going to go in. And the first thing you want to do is start off with a circle. Find a spot, and it can be as big or as small as you want. Find a spot and put in a circle. We're going to have to do a couple layers, but that's okay. Just do your best to paint a circle. Like, no one ever gets a perfect circle, but don't worry too much about that. And then on the bottom of the circle, what you want to do is kind of put in like a little bit of a triangle in like that. And then we want to go over it, with a little triangle, but not like a point at the end. kind of like an ice cream cone without the cone part. We're just painting the ice cream part. And it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. That doesn't really matter too much. And we got to let that dry. But while we're doing this, you kind of see a pattern here now. We're going to move on here. We're going to let this dry. Now we'll move on there. Let that dry. Move on to the next part. Pick out another color that we want for a balloon. And I want green. So let's get some green. And we're going to paint the exact same shape, just somewhere else. I'm going to put one like right here. And this one I think is going to be a little bit smaller. You don't want them to be all the same size, because then it's going to look like they're all like right next to each other. We want some to be bigger than the others. So make, you know, a big one and then a small one. All right, we got some green in there. And then we want to put in the little triangle kind of bit on the bottom where it's kind of flat right there. You see that shape? That's like our good hot air balloon shape. And we'll go back in with a little more green on top of it, just to get a little more color in there for now. We will come back and add more to it after it dries. That looks pretty good. Now I want to put in a couple more, but I want a smaller one. So I'm going to go with an even smaller brush. Pick out another color. I think I want a purple one. Let's put a purple one. So I had like this drop of red hit right there. So let's mix in the purple with that red. And let's make a really small one. Real small purple one off in the distance here. And that's what it's going to do when you make it smaller or larger, is it's going to make it look like it's off in the distance. It's farther away from you. And it just makes for a more interesting painting. And then let's put the little bit on the bottom. So start with a circle and then put the little bit on the bottom. Looks good. All right, now I want one more at least, maybe two more. Let's see. I think I'm going to go with an orange and a yellow one. Definitely going to do an orange. I don't know about yellow, maybe not. Let's put the orange one right here, and this one's going to be kind of big. Put the orange one right here. So anytime you go over something you've already painted, you got to do it a couple times probably. So we've painted the background, and now we're trying to paint on top of that. And to do that and to make it really bright, like you're going to have to do a couple coats. Like we'll have to go over these balloons another time to make it really bright and colorful. There we go. And let's see. One more color. I think this other color, I'm going to do something a little wild. We're going to mix, let's see. I want it more of a violet color, so I'm going to take some red and some purple and kind of mix it together a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Kind of more of a maroon or a violet, and that is going to be up here. And that one's going to be kind of small too. Should probably use the smaller brush though for the smaller balloon, just to make it easier on myself. There we go. All right, now that we've got our balloons done, mostly, our mountains should be mostly dry by now. Yeah, they're pretty dry. So let's wash out our brush. We're going to paint in another row of mountains. This one, though, we're going to try and make a little darker. So let's go in and get some more black. We need to thin it out a little bit more, though. So you see here, I'm thinning it out just a little bit. Get some more water in there. That's how you thin out your paint and get it lighter. There isn't really like, you could get some white, but a lot of the time most watercolor painters don't really use white too much. They just thin out the paint like we're doing here. So this is a little bit thinner or a little bit darker than what we had before. It's thinned out but a little bit darker. You see how it's a little darker there? And paint in another mountain range, but just put it, you know, below the last one, below the first one we've painted. And then once you get to the other side, kind of fill it in again. There we go. And now we can go back to our balloons. Yeah, just I want that like right there, I guess, I think. Try and get it kind of even, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Art is never perfect. There we go. All right. Now we want to go back in and work on our balloons some more, but now we want to change them a little bit, and we want to put in some light and shadow. So you want to pick out which side your sun is on, and we're not going to paint the sun into our picture. A lot of the time when you look at a photograph of a landscape or something, you usually don't see the sun. A lot of the time, like, the sun is like way over here, or it's like way over there or something. It's just not in the picture. But we do want to pick out like what side our sun is going to be on. So do we want our sun on the left side or on the right side? I think, let's see, I'm just going to pick the sun is going to be on the left side. So because the sun is on the left side of my balloons are going to be brighter and lighter than the right side. The right side, away from the sun, is going to be darker. That's why, like you see here, like on my hand even, there's shadows behind my hand. You see here, this side of my hand is darker than this side because the sun is coming through the window that's over there and making this side brighter. So if the sun is over here, this side of my balloon is going to be brighter than that side. So how do we make this side darker or one side lighter? So we want to go in with our brush, and first thing we want to do though is paint in a little more red because we want this to be brighter. So let's start off first by repainting the entire balloon with this color, but just going over it one more time. And like I said, that's going to make it brighter. It's going to make the color stand out more because we had painted on top of blue. So that blue underneath it changes it, and that's why we have to go over it a second time to make it stand out even more. So now we've got it standing out really well. It looks great. Now we want to make it a little darker. So you could add a little bit of black, but I don't like to use black to make things darker if I don't have to, if they're not black. Like if they're colored like this, I like to use just a darker color. So that would mean what's a little darker than red is some purple. So I'd take some purple in to my red, and we want to do it kind of just on one side. It's really similar to, you know, this painting where we had like the gradation here, or this painting where we have another gradation of color. It's just in a really small area now because it's our balloon here. So you want to put the darker spot way to the right. You see how I put that on the right side to begin with, way far on the right. And now I'm going back in and going all the way to the side and just kind of spreading that darker color a little bit more over to the right or to the left of my balloon, and trying to get that gradation of color. You see now I've gotten kind of that nice gradation, and you want to kind of stop with the darker color somewhere about in the middle, and then I can come back with a little more purple and make it even a little darker on the side here, but not too much, just a little bit. Just get that little bit of more darkness. So we have our light and our dark on our balloon. We have our light and shadow. And that shows like where the sun is again. The sun is over here on this side. That looks pretty good. So let's work on the other ones. So here we have our maroon one. So I'm going to take that maroon paint that I already had mixed up a little bit, go back in and repaint this balloon. This one we might have to do even a third time. I don't know. Sometimes that twice just isn't enough. I might just leave that for right now and come back and work on that one. We're going to leave that one for now. It's a little too wet also. When it's a little too wet, it's hard to work with sometimes. So let's go into our green one. Let's redo our green one. And you just repaint a little bit of that green. And so for our green, to darken it up, we want to use a little bit of blue. So take a little bit of blue on there and just add it to the right side. And then we want to kind of just put that little gradation in again. Looks pretty good. Okay, let's move on to our orange one. We just want to repaint the orange a little bit. And then to make the orange a little darker, we can use some red. So we take some red and put it on the right side, whatever the darker side would be for your balloon. We just add a little bit of red in. You can even make, with the orange, you can make one side a little lighter even. If you take some yellow, you put some yellow on the one side. But it's a lot harder to make one side lighter than to make this, you know, the side darker. You see here I added some yellow to it. It didn't really change it that much though. Changed it a little bit, but not a lot. So it's really hard to get, you know, something to be lighter. We basically would have to do like what we did a couple weeks ago with our clouds, where we just kind of keep putting water on there and then using some paper towels and wiping it off. It's really the best way to get a color lighter, but there we go with a little darker one. Let's do our purple balloon now. Purple one's coming out really dark, but that'll be okay. When you have something that's really dark like this, though, this is the point where you do have to add a little bit of black to make it darker. And it's going to be really hard to see even now. But yeah, it's coming out a little darker though. And just kind of stop on one side. Let's see, is this still pretty wet? And it's still pretty wet. So, let's see, I think our mountains down here are dry though. So let's go in with that. We're going to put in one more layer of mountains on here. This time though, we don't really need to thin out the black too much. And just put in this last little bit of mountains. Kind of have them move however you want. Yeah. I want a little mountain over here, like right there, yep. And maybe there's one over here too. Looks like we need a little more mountainy bits over here. There we go. That looks pretty good. I like that. All right. Now to finish off our balloons, we need a basket. Like, how do you fly around in this thing? You can't really fly around in it if there's nothing to hold you in there. So we need to put a basket on them. So I'm going to use the smallest brush. We're going to use some brown to start with. So get that nice and wet. Get some brown there. What you want to do underneath the balloon is you want to make a little box, but not directly right at the bottom of the balloon, but kind of like below the balloon. Like you see there, I've kind of gone below the balloon. And this part of the balloon right there is kind of how big you want your box, the box to be. And each one of them should be bigger or smaller depending on the size of the balloon. So I've got one right there. We're going to paint it all brown. And then you got to have something to attach to the balloon. So from the box, go to like the side of the balloon, kind of, with a line like that. Not to like the bottom right there. You want it kind of more to the side, because the straps that hold the basket go all the way to like the top of the balloon. On the inside usually, and on the outside sometimes. So each one of our balloons needs a basket though. Well, like I said, each one should be a different size, because the balloons are all different sizes. So I'm going to put one right about there. This one's a little bit smaller than the other one. And then we need the ropes to hold the basket to our balloon, our hot air balloon. There we go. Now for this one here, we're going to have to paint over our mountain a little bit, which is fine though. Paint over the mountain just a little bit. As long as these mountains are dry, you can paint on top of them and it'll be totally fine. You could even put a balloon, you know, a real small balloon like down near the mountains if you wanted. There we go. And a tiny little one here. So make the basket pretty small. And even though this balloon isn't completely finished yet, like we know how big it is though, so we know how big the basket will be. Somewhere about like that. Okay, now let's finish off that balloon. I'm probably going to have to go in with some darker color though, and go kind of let it mix on here. Get the purple over there, and then we'll put some red over here and let it kind of mix on the surface. We can always add a little bit of purple to the red over here too, and darken it back up. There we go. That looks pretty good. Pretty good. Now, of course, you can come in and you can add some stripes to your balloons, or you could have made the balloons striped to begin with. You can experiment with that if you want. You can put some birds in the sky, but the one thing I like to put in is people. And we want some little people flying our balloons. So I usually put in, you know, a tiny little head, a tiny little body, and then, you know, maybe something, a little arm or something like that. Make them real tiny though, because these balloons are huge. Let's put, you know, another little person over here. They're over there. You don't have to add much for the person. Put a little head in, a tiny little body, because you can barely see them. Put in tiny little people flying over their balloons. Of course, you can put anything in the balloons if you want. It could be a horse flying them. We got horses flying balloons. Let it be a little weird if you want. Tiny little people. And then because we have our light and shadow also on the baskets, you want to go in and make those darker on one side too. I went a little too dark on this one though. So I'm going to go over it with some brown. There we go. See how I'm mixing it right there on the basket. That's totally fine if you get it too dark. There we go. Let's put in a little darkness on this side. I still got a little bit of that same paint on the brush. Let's put a little on this side. Little over here. And just a tiny little bit on this one. This one's a tiny box. There we go. And our beautiful painting is done. Of course, you could put in some clouds if you want to. You could put in the clouds like we did on the painting a couple weeks ago. But I would do, if you're going to do that, I would do that before you put in your balloons. But you can always repaint it. You can always try again, repaint it. This one looks great though. I hope yours came out just as great as mine. And if you have any questions, of course, hit me up with an email. And have a great day. Bye.